if you thought sanctuary laws only affect one part of the country, it's my sad duty to report to you that that is not the case. Sanctuary policies and their destructive effects are all over this country. And we're here today with Jason Hopkins, investigative associate at the Immigration Reform Law Institute. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Brian. Always good to
Hi.
talk to you.
Thank you. The last couple of times we've had you on, you've talked to us about things you've found around our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. And now I understand you've got a story about the other Washington on the other side of the country. Tell us what you found.
Yeah, and it just goes to show you this is happening across the country.
Right.
What we've seen here in King County, Washington, which encompasses Seattle, so very, very progressive enclave. What we've seen is just a real life example of the consequences of sanctuary policies. To kind of encapsulate everything that went on, real great guy, Ian Eccles, local resident of Kent over there in that area, Kent, Washington, went out for a turkey hunt on his own in May, so earlier this year, and just went missing. His friends couldn't find him, didn't report to work the day or a couple days afterwards. He was reported missing. Eventually, a suspect was named. Turns out that individual, Jorge Omar Alcantara Gonzalez, had a long history with police and with immigration enforcement. This is a guy who had been voluntarily returned at the border 3 times, and he had actually been arrested locally over there in King County 4 times between 2017 to 2019. And every time he was arrested, nearly every time, he was subject to immigration detainers by ICE 4 different times. So 4 different instances where ICE had asked for him to be held in custody, so an ICE agent could come over and take custody of him because he was living in the country illegally. And every single detainer was ignored throughout 2017 to 2019. And now we see here he has been caught, arrested, and he has been charged for the disappearance and charged with second-degree murder for Ian Eccles. So we're left here wondering, what if King County had actually cooperated with ICE, just simply honoring the detainer, maybe just 1 out of those 4 times? Could Ian still be alive today? We honestly can't speculate, but in a lot of ways, I mean, we know things would certainly be different. And I've spoken to Ian's family. It's a very sad story, and they do wish that the law was just followed, and that King County had simply cooperated with ICE to just even the least little bit to have possibly avoided this tragedy.
Yeah. Now, in the report, Jason, that's you can view on IRLI.org. If I understand correctly, both King County and Washington State each have their own separate sanctuary laws. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So you see in King County, they actually passed an ordinance as far back as 2009, really restricting how the local sheriff's office there can ask around or ask about a suspect's immigration status. But more strikingly is in Washington State, the governor, Inslee, he signed 2 different initiatives, if you will, that really restricts ICE's and how they can operate there. In 2017, he signed an executive order that restricts police in the state from cooperating with ICE, mostly by restricting them from enforcing any sort of immigration federal laws. And then he doubled down on this executive order by signing a bill into law. That is the Keep Washington Working Act. And what that does is basically forbid jails throughout the state from honoring these ICE detainers. And that was signed in 2009. And so we see the consequences of that. These jails, police, they can't honor these detainers. And now we see this, this person, Ian Eccles. What if that detainer was honored, just even 1 of those 4 times? Omar Alcantara Gonzalez would have been placed into ICE custody and presumably eventually deported instead of being released out into the public for him to continually commit crimes.
Yeah. Now, this Governor Inslee is an interesting character because In addition to everything you mentioned, he just won re-election for a third term yesterday. So if anyone thinks that the people of Washington are outraged by this carnage that's taking place as a result of these sanctuary policies, obviously that's not the case because he just got reelected for the second time. And in the campaign ad he ran, he's claiming how great he was on coronavirus. He's actually putting that he's keeping the people safe in Washington, which is ridiculous considering the kind of stories you're finding there. How do they push these sanctuary policies and at the same time claim that they're tough on crime and keeping the community safe?
It's really perplexing how he thinks he can have it both ways. I mean, can he go to Ian Eccles' family and tell him he's tough on crime? I mean, he certainly can't. I think what you're seeing here is such a large rebuke from progressive states against the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigration, to the point where they're not wanting to help out with immigration officials whatsoever. I mean, right? I mean, this executive order that he signed was in 2017. That was under Trump's tenure. And then more recently here in 2019, this was legislation that was passed by state lawmakers, and then he signed into law. So you're seeing just a huge shift over to sanctuary measures. And this is where they feel like they have to go. It certainly doesn't seem like something that would be supported by a politician who's tough on crime. And not to mention, this isn't just a one-off example. There are numerous instances now in the past few years of residents of Washington State, King County in particular, being allegedly murdered by people who've come to find out are living in the country illegally. And many of them had been arrested previously, but of course, detainers placed on them were ignored. I mean, in the case for Omar Alcantara Gonzalez, I mean, this is a guy who in 2017 was arrested for a DUI. Shortly afterward, I mean, he was arrested for noncompliance, arrested again for, at the time, he was charged with theft of a vehicle. It was pled down to vehicle prowling. So you even see an example here. And we found this out when IRLI was filing these records requests. County lawmakers or county officials, they're actually pleading these cases down, possibly to even avoid immigration consequences. So very actively trying to shield these criminals, and certainly very antithetical to any sort of law and justice or law and order mantra that I can see.
There seems to be a common thread among a lot of these sanctuary politicians. I recall recently New York Mayor Bill de Blasio had an incident similar to this in his city, and his response was that, if they commit a crime like this, I'm for deporting them as much as anyone else. And they only seem to want to get tough on criminal aliens in their country only after they've committed these capital crimes. Why does someone have to die before these politicians are willing to take action?
That's actually the same sort of question that Ian Eccles' brother, Nathan, said to me when I spoke to him. I mean, why does it have to get to the point where someone has to die until politicians in the area ask, how did we get this far? I mean, right? Why does it have to get to the point where someone's dead, someone's been killed, that we finally have to ask, well, did we even implement the right policies? I mean, what led to this? It's a tragedy. It's not good that this happened, but if it can be anything, it should be a wake-up call to the people of New York City and then here in Washington State. It needs to be a wake-up call to them. And I mean, that's what ICE needs to do. I mean, that's what we do here at IRLI. We need to shine a light on this and show them there are real-life consequences to these laws, real-life tragedies. This isn't just something rhetorical. I mean, this is actually happening. Ian Eccles leaves behind a daughter and a grandson, and devastated family. I spoke to his brother. I spoke to his sister. His parents, they're also devastated by this. Real life consequences here.
I think it's worth noting also, Jason, not only is it a tragedy, but it's a preventable tragedy. It's an unnecessary tragedy. There are things that could easily have been avoided if we only had some people with the leadership qualities to protect the people in their community rather than serving some radical political agenda.
Right. And you have to ask, I mean, who's served when a King County jail does not honor detainer and releases someone who's been arrested for the fourth time? I mean, who's served by that? I mean, this is a person who's arrested numerous times. ICE is simply asking them to hold on to them just for a few hours until they can make an apprehension. This person is not only in violation of immigration law, but has shown to have complete disregard for any sort of state and local laws. So, I mean, you got to ask yourself, I mean, who's being served? Who's being helped by this besides the criminal himself? It's very perplexing. And again, the most we can do right now is just shine a light on this, talk about this, and voters in the area in these sanctuary districts need to see what's going on.
Yeah. Now, I've heard some people speculate what can ICE do, because these local jurisdictions that have leaders who are basically forcing their local law enforcement to abide by these sanctuary policies are never going to voluntarily do the right thing. So I've heard people say, well, why doesn't ICE just put an office right next door to the jail so that when the guy does get released, they can be right there to grab him? They don't have to have this notification process, which we've talked about in Montgomery County, Maryland. Is there anything that you can think of that ICE can do to work around this blockade that's been thrown up in front of them when they're trying to follow federal law?
Right, and you listed one example, and yeah, we spoke, or yeah, I remember speaking to one ICE official who said it's gotten so bad in Montgomery County, Maryland, that they are considering to open up some sort of satellite office over by the Montgomery County detention facility there to just apprehend these guys. Because for people who've been following us in Montgomery County, not only are they not cooperating, but when they do kind of pseudo cooperate, they're releasing these individuals just minutes after they notify ICE. So there's no way for ICE to get there. I mean, in the case for Washington State and King County there, it would help. I mean, if they can open up an office close by, obviously that's not feasible for across the country, right? I mean, federal government only gives ICE so much funds. So I mean, what they need to do, I mean, if they can do that, they need to, and they make very clear that sanctuary policies are not going to stop them from enforcing the law. I mean, these ICE agents are still deployed in New York City, Los Angeles, and even Seattle. I mean, we hear news, they let us know when they're conducting operations throughout there. So they're not going to stop them, but it certainly doesn't help. And we have seen with the numbers that it can have an effect on total number of criminal illegal aliens that they do catch. Another thing they can do is basically name and shame. I mean, what they're doing here, I was actually notified of this case earlier this year by an ICE agent who said, hey, you need to take a look at this. And that was good of them to highlight this and show them that these are the consequences. This is what's going on. So when you see something wrong that's happening, ICE needs to point a finger at it and show everyone. That's the most they can do right now until the community can really recognize this and vote in change.
Now, ICE is the law enforcement component of this equation. There's also the legal component. Now, you may recall that earlier in the Trump administration, the then Attorney General Jeff Sessions had tried to go after some of these sanctuary jurisdictions. I believe they were trying to withhold law enforcement grants to certain communities that were not allowing ICE agents to do their job. And there was the pushback on that was tremendous. And they went forum shopping. They found a friendly judge to swat it down. Is there anything legally that you're aware of that the federal government can do to force these communities to either comply or to work around their obstacles they're putting up?
Legally speaking, I mean, it can be pretty precarious. Yes, as far as those law enforcement grants, if there's any way for them to keep pushing that, prevent them from winning these grants, that certainly helps. Another legal route is, I mean, these victims, families' victims, I mean, they should sue. They have grounds to sue. I can't speak for Eccles's family, but they should be able to have a case and sue for a wrongful death, for Ian. Perhaps against King County, certainly against Washington State, because King County obviously is subject to state law, and it was these state laws that forced King County to operate in this way. I mean, in fact, when investigating this case, I contacted Catitas County, which is a neighboring county, and that had, in custody of Ian Eccles. They said, well, they cited state law and that they couldn't answer my my inquiries. I was asking if they would actually cooperate with ICE, and they said, per state law, I can't answer that. So it's ultimately the state that they could go to. But yeah, these are some legal options they can take, and I mean, they should. I mean, someone's got to push back.
Yeah. There's that saying, all politics is local, and anyone who thinks these stories that we've exposed here in these videos, that's just some faraway place, that'll never affect me, These are your communities. Ian Eccles could have been your husband, your brother, your uncle. It's happening to people in your community. So people who just blow that off and say, oh, that's happening somewhere else, it won't affect me. That is not the case. These things are happening. They're probably happening right in your community. You just don't know about it.
Absolutely. These sanctuary jurisdictions, their numbers are climbing. They're not declining. So we're only going to hear more stories like this because they're spreading across the country. So yeah, if you think this can ever happen to you or a loved one, I'd be more suspect of that train of thought because this is spreading.
Exactly. All right, great job, Jason. If you like what you've seen in our content, hit our like and subscribe buttons below. And you can also check out more from IRLI on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Parler. And you can read more about IRLI and support us at IRLI.org. So we'll leave it there. Jason, thanks again.
Thank you.